Page number 22. Are you washed in the blood? Page 22. Church tonight, and several preachers in the building tonight. We're going to recognize you in a moment. But Brother Hannah, would you lead us in prayer, please? Get us started. Amen. You can be seated. I'm glad to see folks out tonight, and what a blessing it is to be in church on a Monday night after a beautiful day like we had. We have several folks visiting with us, and I'm thankful. I'd like to first of all recognize the preachers that are in the building tonight. So if you, the Lord has called you to preach God's word, fellas, would you stand and let's just get your name. Even though we know your name, go ahead and stand up. You call God to preach. Brother Fred, you start with you. Okay. Amen. Amen. Bill? All right. Thank you, fellows, for coming and have preachers in the house. Also have our neighbors right back here. Thank you for coming. It's always good to get neighbors to come to church. And you know, Brother Tyler, where are you? Oh, he's back here. When failed to count everybody Sunday night. I want to tell you how determined folks are to get to church and not be late. There was 12 visitors out in the parking lot that we did not count. And they were about that long, about that tall, and they were the Bennett girls' pigs. And so they didn't. Hey, I'm counting everybody after COVID. You know, they show up. Hey, they instead of being late or not coming to church, they just brought them with them. Just go on in there. I didn't mean to embarrass you girls. I'm sorry. But I thought it was funny. I've been waiting on this. But thank you for coming. Brother Dave, you got a song for us?
All the great leaders who sleep in their graves one day will bow and proclaim,
He's the Lord of all glory, the crowned King of kings. All creation will thunder his name.
That name is Jesus. all stand together as the choir is dismissed. Let's turn to page number 23. There's power in the blood, page 23.
Amen. You can be seated, aren't you? Glad there is power in the blood and saving power. And let's go ahead and receive the offering. Ushers, come. Thank you for being in your place tonight. This is a good crowd of folks to come out to church on a Monday night. I'm thankful that you're faithful in God's house. We receive an offering for the men of God that's with us this week. And Brother Austin, would you pray for us? Thank you for that offering. Brother Dave, y'all come and sing for us. Dave and Anna Lee is going to have a 2-year-old. Thursday, tomorrow? No, Thursday. All right, it's hard to believe, isn't it?
When troubles come against me, I feel so overwhelmed. When it seems the more I'm trying, that my troubles seem to swell. When I've reached the end of me, and my faith is growing dim, I hear a still voice whisper, just bring it all to Him. I just bring it all to Him. When no one understands, when you're looking for an answer, God always has a plan. When the burdens get so heavy and your sight is getting dim, oh, it sure is good knowing that I can bring it all to Him. In the throne room of my Savior, I find a sweet relief. I find strength to bear my burdens. I find comfort for my grief. When my cup is overflowing, as He fills it to the brim, what a blessed consolation when I bring it all to Him. I just bring it all to Him. When no one understands, when you're looking for an answer, God always has a plan. When the burdens get so heavy and your sight is getting dim, oh, it sure is good knowing that I can bring it all to Him. Only at the throne of God, just fall down on your knees. He will hear your troubled cry and meet your every need. If you'll bring it all to Him, when no one understands, when you're looking for an answer, God always has a plan. When the burdens get so heavy and your sight is getting dim, oh, it sure is good knowing that I can bring it all to Him. When the burdens get so heavy and your sight is getting dim, oh, it sure is good knowing that I can bring it all to Him.
Amen. Song, and I'm glad it's a great truth. We can bring it all. 1989, I became pastor for the first time in my life. I was the youngest member of the church that I pastored in Richmond, Virginia. Every other man in the church was older than me. And wasn't too many months into my first pastorate, I realized that everything I needed to know, they didn't teach me in Bible college. And so I started going to pastor school in Hammond, Indiana. My wife and I, about this time of year, would make a journey from Richmond, Virginia to Hammond, hungry for something that only God could give. Questions that no one could give, but God had. And I found great help and strength in those journeys to Hammond, Indiana in pastor school. And one of the men that stuck out in my mind in those conferences, those hours and hours of classes and preaching, was Dr. Ray Young. His messages always hold in my heart, always convicted me, always helped me to go back home and do a little more and do a little better and be just a little, I knew a little bit more about what God wanted me to do. Little did I realize that during that time, the man that we have here tonight was in the process of busing 8.5 million people to church. I didn't realize at that time the magnitude of what was going on. Over 101,393 people were baptized during his ministry at the bus ministry there at First Baptist. He said, "Preacher, how did that turn out?" 539 of those bus kids went on to Bible college. 173 began to teach Sunday school at First Baptist. And so I said all that to say this. Church, it is a great privilege and honor to have Dr. Ray Young with us and to bring what God has put upon his heart. He's been praying that God would Give him the right words to say. We've been praying God would let our hearts receive the words that he's about to say. And so, Dr. Young, would you come and bring us God's word?
If you don't mind, I'm going to put these in here. Genesis chapter 42. Genesis chapter 42. And do I need to turn this on? All right. Okay. Let me get it out of my pocket here. It's hard to get things out of my pocket. All right. Whoops. Now it's on. All right. If you want to adjust that for us, I appreciate it. While everybody is turning to Genesis chapter 42. Genesis chapter 42. Does that sound about normal now, the sound? Is it somewhere close? All right, great. Genesis chapter 42. Of course, I'm going to make an attempt to be as brief as possible because I want to make sure we save enough time for Brother Darrell to bring the main message tonight. I always look forward to getting to be in a meeting with him. We get to speak together maybe 3-4 times a year, sometimes more than that. And I'm always grateful that we have that privilege. I appreciate Brother Larry allowing us to do it here just about every year for the last, I think, 10 years now. Tonight we're going to look at something in the life of a man by the name of Jacob. Most of us in the room tonight would be familiar with Jacob in the Old Testament. Just to give you a very brief reminder of who he is, who he was. Jacob is the man who had 4 different wives, and I don't mean, one died and he married another and so forth. He had 4 different wives at the same time, and he was married to all 4 of them, and they all lived in the same house together. And between those 4 wives, Jacob had 12 sons. And you can imagine the chaos and confusion and strife and jealousy and bickering and even hatred that there was in that home. Was such a odd situation, such an ungodly situation, such an unscriptural situation of having 4 wives, 4 mothers, all married to the same man in the same house. But because of that hatred that was in that house, one of the 12 boys, his name was Joseph, was hated by the other 11. In fact, he was hated so badly at one point, the father sent Joseph, the youngest one, out in the field to check on the other 11. And when they saw him coming, they decided to kill him. So they put him down in a pit, let him starve to death. But while he was in that pit, 10 of the brothers got together and decided, well, instead of letting him starve to death and us get nothing out of it, why don't we sell him as a slave, make a few dollars? So they did. And then all 11 of the brothers got together and came up with an idea that after Joseph had been sold as a slave, we'll go back home, show his coat to Daddy, all shredded up and blood on it, and make Daddy come to the conclusion that maybe he was eaten by a wild beast. And that's exactly what the father, Jacob, thought had happened to his son Joseph. But meanwhile, you know the story, Joseph winds up down in Egypt. He's sold as a slave down in Egypt. And through a series of events that I won't go into any of the details of tonight, Joseph goes all the way from being a slave in Egypt to being the Lord of the land, second in command underneath the king. And God did that on purpose because God knew that there was a famine coming that was going to affect the entire world. And God put Joseph in place in Egypt on purpose so that he could prepare for that famine, so that Joseph and the nation of Egypt could be prepared to provide the food that the entire known world at that time would need during the famine. So sure enough, the famine comes and it affects the entire known world in that area at the time, even including the land of Canaan, where Jacob and his 11 other sons were still living. It got to the point where they didn't have anything to eat, so Jacob told 10 of his 11 sons, go down to Egypt and get us some food. He kept the 12th one, Benjamin, the youngest one, at home. He was afraid to let him go, thinking something might If anything happens to my boys while they're gone, I don't lose all of them. So he kept one at home. When the 10 brothers get down to Egypt, there's Joseph, their brother, as Lord of the land, the one that's dealing out the food. They have to appeal to him for the right to purchase some food. But they don't recognize him, because the last time they saw him, he was a little lad. They sold him as a slave, and he was just a little kid. And they don't recognize him. And he puts up some disguises and different things that keeps them from recognizing him on purpose. But he recognizes them. And he says to them, I know why you're here. You're not here just to buy some food. You came down to spy on us. And he puts them in prison. And they say to him, oh, no. We're not spies. In fact, we're all 10 brothers. In fact, there's 12 of us altogether. And one is not. Speaking of Joseph, they don't realize they're speaking to Joseph, but they're speaking of Joseph. And they said, and then the 12th one, he's at home with Daddy. And we promise you, we're not spies. Well, Joseph says to his 10 brothers, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep one of you here as ransom, and it winds up being Simeon. And I'm going to let the other 9 of you go home. I'm going to give you the food you needed and let you go home, and you get your younger brother and bring him back. Joseph wanted to see his other brother, and he said, you bring him back, and that'll prove you're not spies, and everything will be fine. And so Simeon stays. The other 9 leave to go home. But as they're leaving to go home, he not only gives them the food they came for, he sneaks their money back into their bags without them knowing it. So they go home and they tell Daddy what happened on the journey. And that's where we pick up the story. Look at Genesis chapter 42. We're going to read verse 29. The 9 brothers have just gotten home. And here's what they say, verse 29. Genesis 42:29. And they, the 9 brothers, came unto Jacob their father, unto the land of Canaan, and told him all that befell them, saying, the man who is Lord of the land, they're speaking of their brother Joseph, but still don't know that's who they're speaking of. The man who is Lord of the land spake roughly to us, and took us for spies of the country. And we said unto him, we are true men, we are no spies. And we be 12 brethren, sons of our father. One is not, speaking of Jacob, they were speaking of Joseph, they were speaking to Joseph, but speaking of him, not realizing who they were speaking to. They told their brother Joseph, we be 12 brethren, sons of our father. One is not, and the youngest is this day with our father in the land of Canaan. And the man, the Lord of the country, said unto us, hereby shall I know that ye are true men. Leave one of your brethren here with me, and take food for the famine of your household, and be gone. And bring your youngest brother unto me, then shall I know that ye are no spies, but that ye are true men. So will I deliver you your brother Simeon, that he kept there in prison, and ye shall traffic in the land. Traffic means, you've heard of the drug traffic. We speak of human trafficking. That traffic in the land means you can come and go and buy and sell here. I'll let you come back and buy some more food and so forth if you'll bring your brother with you. All right, verse 35 says, and it came to pass, as they emptied their sacks there in the front yard in front of their dad after they got back home, and it came to pass, as they emptied their sacks, that behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when both they, the 9 brothers, and their father, Jacob, saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. Would you look at me just for a second? You see what's happened here? They got home. Dad comes out to greet them. Immediately they begin to explain why Simeon's not with them, and tell Dad everything that befell them, or everything that had happened to them. And Dad says, well, at least, let's get the food out and begin to use it. And they poured the food out. I think it was some corn or something, if I remember the story right. And when they did, their money falls out. And it scares them to death. The 9 brothers are all scared. The father's scared. Because now it seems like that this Lord of the land, who accused them to be spies, has not only accused them to be spies, but he has set it up to where now he can blackmail them that they're not only spies, they're also thieves. Well, that scares them. They're all afraid because of that. Now look at verse 36. And Jacob their father said unto them, Me have ye bereaved of my children. Speaking of Joseph and Simeon. Joseph is not, and Simeon is not. And ye will take Benjamin away. All these things are against me. I want you to notice that statement that Jacob made. All these things. The fact that his one son, Joseph, has been gone now for years and supposedly dead as far as he knew. And now Simeon's gone. And now you want to take Benjamin and take him down there, and I'm afraid I won't get him back. And in the moment of fear, Jacob makes the statement, all of these things are against me. Jacob said, 2 of my sons are gone. I'm afraid I'm going to lose the other one. And because of my fear, I fear that all these things are happening against me. But what Jacob didn't realize was all of those events were not happening against him. They were happening for him. And not only for him, but for the whole world. Now, I want you to notice how distorted his perspective is, all based on his fear. He thought that all of these events were negative when actually every single one of them was positive. And he thought all of these events are happening because of how they will affect me. They're all against me, when really all of these events were happening because of how they were affecting the whole world. See how distorted his perspective is? Because of his fear. So let's look at how Jacob allowed his fear to distort his thinking. Look again at verse 36. And Jacob their father said unto them, Me have ye, speaking to his 9 sons, me have ye bereaved of my children. Because of Jacob's fear, he was blaming the wrong persons for what was happening. As far as he could tell, from his viewpoint, 2 of his sons were gone now. Joseph was dead. Simeon was in prison. And from his viewpoint, it was all his 9 sons' fault. He was blaming them. He was saying, because of you, my 2 sons are missing. But you got to remember, Jacob was the one that sent Joseph out in the field to check on him. If he had been eaten by a wild beast, as Jacob thought at that particular moment, it wasn't the 9 boys' fault. He's the one that sent him out there. And the 9 boys didn't kill him, as far as Jacob knew at the moment. A wild beast had eaten him. And it wasn't the 9 boys that put Simeon in prison. It was the Lord of the land that put him in prison. And besides that, Jacob is the one who told them to go down there and get the corn. Look back in chapter 42, look at verse 1. In chapter 42, verse 1, it says, Now when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, Why do you look one upon another? You know, what he's saying is, you and I would say, why are you just sitting here? When he realized we're hungry, but they've got corn down there in Egypt, he looked at his sons and said, Why are you guys just sitting here? Now look at verse 2. And he, Jacob, said, Behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get you down thither and buy us from thence, that we may live and not die. Whose idea was it that the 9 boys go down to Egypt? The 10 boys go down to Egypt. It was Jacob's idea. But because of his fear, he blamed the wrong people, the wrong persons, for the problems that he thought he was facing. Now let's continue reading. And Jacob their father said unto them, Me have ye bereaved of my children. Joseph is not. So my second statement is this. Not only was he blaming the wrong persons for what he thought his problems were, but not only was he doing that, but his conclusions were all based on inaccurate facts. He thought his son Joseph was dead. He wasn't dead. He was still alive, but he thought he was dead. So his fear was based on inaccurate facts. He didn't know what was going on. He thought he did, but he didn't really know what was going on. Now let's continue reading. And Jacob their father said unto them, Me have ye bereaved of my children. Joseph is not, which was an inaccurate statement, and Simeon is not. Now, when he said Joseph is not, you got to remember, Jacob's not thinking, I'm missing Joseph. He's out there somewhere, and I don't know how to find him. When he said Joseph is not, he was saying he's dead. Then he used the same phrase to describe Simeon, and Simeon is not. Because of his fear, he was exaggerating problems. Simeon wasn't dead. He was just in prison. And Jacob knew he was in prison. And Jacob knew there had already been a promise that if you'll just bring your other brother down here, we'll let him out. But because of his fear, he was blaming the wrong persons. And his fear was based on inaccurate information. And because of his fear, he was exaggerating the problem. All right, let's continue reading. And Jacob their father said unto them, Me have ye bereaved of my children. Joseph is not, and Simeon is not, and ye will take Benjamin away. All these things are against me. Notice that phrase, all of these things are against me. As Jacob's emotions escalated, or we might say as his emotions spiraled down out of control, he made a broad stroke statement that could not possibly be true. All these things are against me. As if nobody else in the whole world was affected by what was actually happening at this moment. He said, all of these things are against me, when all of these things were for the whole world. He was that far off on his perspective, all based on his fear. Based on his fear, he was blaming the wrong people. His fear was based on inaccurate information. Because of his fear, he was exaggerating the problem. And because of his fear, he made this broad stroke statement that this is all against me, which could not possibly be true. No one person is the only person affected by anything that happens. In his moment of weakness, caused by his fear, Jacob made this statement that he assumed would only be heard by his family. Can you see him standing there in the front yard? Hey, Jacob, your boys are coming. Hey, Jacob, the boys are coming back. And Jacob comes walking out in the front yard, and he sees his boys approaching, and he's standing there, and he's all excited about, and he's, one's missing, and what's going on here? And they begin to tell him all of this, and his emotions start spiraling down out of control, and he sees the money, and he becomes fearful, and he starts blaming the wrong people for what's going on, and his fear is based on inaccurate facts, and because of his fear, he exaggerates the problem, and because of his fear, he makes this broad stroke statement to his family, thinking they're the only ones that's going to hear me say this emotional statement, when what in reality happened is you and I and the rest of the world heard his statement and are still hearing it to this day. I've already made the statement half a dozen times tonight. Jacob's viewpoint, he thought, from his viewpoint, he thought all of these circumstances were negative when they were really positive. He thought they were all against him when they were really for the whole world. You and I would not be as fearful are as discouraged if we'd just realized two things. Number one, we don't know all the facts. None of us know all the facts about what's going on in our lives. None of us know all the facts about what is affecting us personally. None of us have sat in the cabinet meeting. Now, we've all got our opinion, and buddy, I've got my opinion about President Biden and some of the stuff he's doing, and some of the stuff Kamala's doing, and some of the stuff that the people that are controlling them are making them do. I've got all my opinions about all of that, but you know, the honest truth is I haven't sat in one single cabinet meeting yet. You know, the honest truth is all I know is what the news media has told me, and I'm not dead sure I can put all my weight down on either side of the news media. You know, we don't know all the facts. And even if we did know all the facts that the news media knows, and they told us the truth, we still wouldn't know all the facts. We don't know everything. We wouldn't be so fearful. We wouldn't be so discouraged if we would just take a deep breath and wait a minute before we react and realize we probably don't know all the facts. And number two, if we would realize that not everything that happens in this world is based only on how it affects me. In fact, very few events are based solely on how they affect me. Very few decisions are based solely on how they affect me. Very few situations develop on how they solely would affect me. Very few circumstances happen based solely on how they would affect me. You know, I'm only one of 7.8 billion people in this world. And you know, there's very few people that consider me important enough that they have dedicated themselves to my demise and to my destruction. In fact, there's very few people in this world that are even focused on the fact that I'm alive, much less have time to dedicate all their effort. You know, Jacob said this is all happening against me. What you and I need to realize is this: I am not the center of the universe. I am not even the center of the earth. I am not even the center of the United States. I am not even the center of the state of Indiana where I live, or the town of Crown Point that I live in. Or I'm not even the center of Howes Anderson College where I work, and I have worked for 46 years. In fact, I'm not even the center of my own family. You know, the one person in this entire world that would focus more of their attention on me than anybody else in this world, that's my wife. Now, I don't know how much of her attention she focuses on me, what percentage, but if anybody in this world focuses any of their attention on me, it's my wife. She's the one person in this whole world that affects more, that focuses more of her attention on me than anybody else in this world. But you know, even my wife, if she wants to make a decision, she can't just look at me and decide how this decision is going to affect me. Even though she would feel that way more than anybody else, she has to think, how's this going to affect our 3 daughters? How is this going to affect their husbands? How is this going to affect our grandchildren? How is this decision going to affect the college where she and I both work, the testimony of the college? What are the rules at the college where she and I are both employed? What are the employee rules? She has to consider that. She has to consider the laws of the state we live in. She has to consider the laws of the town that we live in. She has to consider what else she has to do besides whatever decision she's making about me. She has to consider how much it'll cost. She has to consider how much strength she has left to do the other things. And if she's the one person in this entire world that focuses more on me than anybody else does, if she has to go through all that to make a decision that's going to affect me, how much more does everybody else in this world have to decide what they're going to do and not do based on other things other than me. Do you know there's a few people over in China that have not given me one moment's thought today about any decision they made? But Jacob said, all this is happening against me. When really it wasn't happening against him, it was happening for him. And it wasn't happening just on how it affected him. It was happening based on what God was doing for the whole world. Jacob told his sons, all my problems are your fault. You are the one that bereaved me of my children. And all these things are happening against me. Can I convince you of one thing tonight that I think would help you? Life is not against you. Life just happens. It just happens. Sun comes up in the east and it sets in the west. The world spins around about once every 24 hours. And every one of the 7.8 billion people on this earth are all affected by what happens. And I'm just one of the 7.8 billion that get affected by it. You remember what our former president said, President Andrew Jackson? He said, take not counsel of thy fears. What he was saying was, if you got a problem and you need some counsel, don't go to your fears to get that counsel. Take not counsel of thy fears. Instead, you and I should take counsel of our faith. You know what you and I should do tonight? We should go ahead and do what we would do if we had enough faith to do it. Instead of not doing what we wouldn't dare do because we're too fearful to do it. Tonight, if I could, I would try my best to convince everybody in this room you don't have to be fearful of everything that's happening in the whole world because it's all going to affect me. No, what's happening in the whole world is going to affect all of us. And it's not all as negative as the news media and others and our fears try to make us think it is. And sometimes when we think this is happening to harm me, what's really happening is it's happening so God can put things in place to take care of all of us. Amen. Thank you.
Think on that a little bit. Amen. Brother Dave, come bring us give the congregation a song. Get you a songbook. We'll give an invitation in just a little bit. Let's stand to our feet, and Brother Dave will tell us what